The cold metal floor felt like ice against Jack Morrison's knees as he waited in the holding cell. The walls were smooth and white, with no windows or decorations, just bright lights that never turned off and the sound of his own breathing. He had been here for 3 days, waiting for his trial to begin. Jack was 42 years old, with short brown hair that was starting to turn gray at the sides. His hands were rough from years of working on spaceships, and his blue eyes looked tired. He wore a simple gray uniform that all prisoners had to wear. The clothes were too big for him and smelled like chemicals. The door opened with a soft hiss. 2 guards walked in. They were not human. One was tall and thin with green skin and 4 arms. The other was shorter and covered in thick fur. Both carried energy weapons on their belts. "Time to go," the green one said. His voice sounded like metal scraping against metal. Jack stood up slowly. His legs were stiff from sitting on the floor. For so long, the guards put metal cuffs on his wrists. The cuffs were cold and heavy. They pushed him forward, through the door and down a long hallway. The hallway was full of other prisoners being taken to their trials. Jack saw beings from dozens of different worlds. Some had scales, others had tentacles or extra eyes. A few looked almost human, but had strange colored skin or unusual features. Most of them looked scared. They walked for what felt like hours through endless corridors. Finally, they reached a massive door made of dark wood. The guards stopped and waited. The door opened by itself, without anyone touching it. The courtroom was huge. The ceiling was so high that Jack could barely see it. Hundreds of seats filled the room, and almost everyone was taken. Beings from across the galaxy had come to watch his trial. Some held signs with his name on them. Others looked angry and pointed at him as he walked by. At the front of the room sat 7 judges. Each one was from a different species. They sat on tall chairs that looked like thrones. In the center sat Judge Valix, the lead judge. He was made of living crystal that changed colors when he moved. His voice sounded like wind chimes when he spoke. "Bring the prisoner forward," Judge Valix said. The guards pushed Jack to a small metal box in the center of the room. This was where he would have to stand during the trial. The box was barely big enough for one person. Jack looked around the room and saw hundreds of eyes staring at him. To his left sat Peter Hayes, his defense lawyer. Peter was human, about 30 years old, with nervous eyes and sweaty hands. He had been trying to help Jack for weeks, but Jack could see that Peter was scared of the judges. To his right sat the prosecutor, a reptilian being named Sectar. His skin was dark green and covered in scales. His eyes were yellow and never seemed to blink. Sectar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. He looked confident and ready to win. Judge Valix stood up. The crystal that made up his body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. "We are here today to judge the crimes of Jack Morrison, a human from the planet Earth. He stands accused of 3 serious crimes." The judge's voice filled the entire room. Every being in the courtroom could hear him perfectly. First, he violated the non-interference directive by interfering with council operations. Second, he destroyed valuable council property. Third, he encouraged rebellion among primitive species. Jack listened to the charges but did not speak. He had decided weeks ago that he would not defend himself. He believed that what he had done was right, even if the council called it a crime. Sektar stood up and walked to the center of the room. His claws clicked against the metal floor as he moved. "Your Honors, Jack Morrison is a terrorist. He attacked a lawful council facility and freed dangerous criminals. He must be punished." The prosecutor pressed a button on his desk. A large screen appeared in the air above the courtroom. Everyone could see what was on the screen. It showed security footage from 3 months ago. On the screen, Jack was leading a group of humans through a dark corridor. They were all carrying weapons and wearing black uniforms. The corridor was inside a council detention facility on the planet Kepler 7. The facility was supposed to be a processing center for refugees, but Jack had discovered the truth. The screen showed Jack and his team breaking down doors and freeing hundreds of beings from small, cramped cells. The prisoners were from many different worlds. Some were barely adults, others were elderly. All of them looked thin and scared. As you can see, Sektar said, the defendant led an armed assault on a council facility. He freed over 2,000 beings who were being held for processing. The prosecutor pressed another button. The screen changed to show Jack fighting with council guards. He was protecting a group of small, furry beings who looked like they could barely walk. Jack used his weapon to keep the guards away while the prisoners escaped. The defendant claims he was rescuing slaves, Sektar continued. But these beings were simply being processed for work assignments. The Council's labor program provides jobs for primitive species who cannot find work on their own worlds. Jack felt his hands form fists. He wanted to shout that the prosecutor was lying. The beings in that facility were not getting jobs. They were being sold as slaves to work in mines and factories across the galaxy. But Jack stayed silent. Peter Hayes stood up. His voice shook as he spoke. Your Honors, my client was trying to save innocent lives. The Council's labor program is actually a slave trade operation. These beings were being sold to the highest bidder. Judge Valix's crystal body flashed red. That is a serious accusation against the Council. Do you have proof? Peter pulled out a small device and pressed a button. The screen above the courtroom changed again. This time it showed documents that Jack had stolen from the Council's computers. The documents had numbers and prices next to the names of different species. These are the real records from the facility, Peter said. They show that the Council was selling these beings to corporations and wealthy individuals. The average price was 5,000 credits per being. The courtroom erupted in noise. Beings from different worlds started shouting and arguing. Some supported Jack, others supported the Council. The guards moved forward, ready to restore order. Judge Valix raised his hand and the room became quiet. The court will review these documents. However, even if the defendant's motives were good, he still broke the law. Good intentions do not excuse criminal actions. Sektar smiled again. Your Honors, the defendant is trying to distract from his crimes. Even if the labor program was improper, he had legal ways to report his concerns. Instead, he chose violence. The prosecutor walked over to his desk and picked up another device. I have testimony from Council enforcers who witnessed the defendant's attack. They will tell you that Jack Morrison killed 17 guards during his assault. Jack closed his eyes. He remembered that day clearly. He had not wanted to kill anyone, but the guards had started shooting at the prisoners. Jack had no choice but to fight back. Those 17 guards had died because they were trying to stop him from saving innocent lives. The screen showed more footage. This time it was from after the rescue. Jack and his team had loaded the freed prisoners onto transport ships. As the ships prepared to leave, Council warships arrived. Jack's ship stayed behind to fight the warships while the prisoners escaped. The defendant's actions led to the destruction of 6 Council ships and the deaths of over 300 personnel, Sektar said. He is responsible for all of these deaths. Peter Hayes tried to object. Your Honors, the Council ships fired first. My client was defending innocent lives. But Judge Valix was not interested in hearing more arguments. The court has heard enough. Testimony, we will now deliberate. The 7 judges stood up and walked through a door behind their chairs. The courtroom became noisy again as beings discussed what they had heard. Jack looked around and saw that many of the spectators were holding signs with his name on them. Some said, hero, others said, criminal. Jack thought about his life before all of this happened. 3 months ago, he had been a decorated officer. In the Terran Space Fleet, he had served on the cruiser Liberty under Captain Lisa Grant for 8 years. He had been proud of his service and proud to represent humanity in the galaxy. Everything changed when he discovered the truth about the Council's labor program. He had been investigating reports of missing refugees when he found the detention facility on Kepler 7. What he saw there changed his life forever. The judges returned after only 10 minutes. Judge Valix stood up and his crystal body flashed bright white. We have reached a decision. Jack Morrison, you are found guilty of all charges. The courtroom exploded in noise. Some beings cheered, others booed. Jack felt the words hit him like a physical blow, but he did not react. He had expected this outcome. You are sentenced to life imprisonment on the prison planet Terminus. Judge. Valix continued. You will serve your sentence without possibility of parole. The guards moved forward to take Jack away. As they put their hands on his arms, Jack spoke for the first time during the entire trial. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the courtroom heard him. History will remember which side we chose, he said. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Beings from dozens of worlds jumped to their feet and started chanting Jack's name. The guards tried to maintain order. 6 months had passed since Jack Morrison arrived at Terminus. The prison planet was a ball of gray rock floating in empty space. There were no trees, no grass, no water except what the guards brought in. The sky was always dark because the planet's sun was too far away to give much light. Jack's cell was small and cold. The walls were made of black metal and there was no window. He had a thin bed, a toilet, and a small table. That was all. The cell was so narrow that he could touch both walls if he stretched out his arms. Every morning at 6, sirens woke the prisoners. Jack would get up and put on his orange prison uniform. The uniform was made of rough material that scratched his skin. Then he would wait for the guards to open his cell door. The guards on Terminus were different from the ones at his trial. These guards were bigger and meaner. Most of them were from warrior species that enjoyed hurting others. They carried electric clubs and used them often. Jack walked down the corridor with hundreds of other prisoners. The corridor was long and filled with the sound of shuffling feet. No one was allowed to talk during the walk to breakfast. If someone spoke, the guards would hit them with their clubs. The dining hall was a huge room with metal tables and benches. The prisoners sat in groups based on their species. Humans sat with humans, Altarians sat with Altarians, and so on. This was not a rule, but it was how things worked in prison. Jack sat at a table with other humans. Most of them were political prisoners like him. There was Ben Clark, a farmer from Mars who had protested against council taxes. Next to him sat Tony Wells, a journalist who had written articles about council corruption. But Jack also sat with beings from other worlds. There was Zara Cole, a young Altarian woman with blue skin and silver hair. She was an engineer who had tried to help her people escape from council labor camps. Her large purple eyes always looked sad, but she was very smart. Across from Jack sat Crom, a Centauri warrior. He was huge, almost 7 feet tall, with thick muscles and scars covering his arms. His people were known for being fierce fighters. Crom had been captured after attacking a council ship that was taking children from his world. Morrison, Crom said in his deep voice. The new prisoners still ask about you? Jack looked around the dining hall. He could see other prisoners watching him. Some pointed at him and whispered to their friends. Ever since he arrived, new prisoners had been coming to Terminus. Many of them had heard about what he did on Kepler 7. They think you are some kind of hero, Zara said quietly. She spoke with a strange accent that made her words sound like music. They want to know if you are planning to escape. Jack shook his head. I am not planning anything. I just want to serve my time. But that was not entirely true. Jack had been watching the prison carefully. He noticed things that other prisoners missed. He saw patterns in how the guards moved. He counted how many guards were on duty at different times. He was not planning to escape, but he was learning about the prison. Tony Wells leaned forward. Jack, you need to know something. The guards have been asking questions about you. They want to know who you talk to and what you discuss. And Jack was not surprised. He had expected the council to watch him closely. What kind of questions? They want to know if you are organizing the prisoners, if you are planning a rebellion. Oh. I? Jack asked with a small smile. Then Clark laughed quietly. You do not need to plan anything. Just by being here, you give people hope. That scares the guards. After breakfast, the prisoners went to the exercise yard. The yard was a large open space surrounded by high walls. Guard towers stood at each corner with armed guards watching everything. The prisoners had 1 hour to walk around or exercise. Jack usually walked alone, but today Zara joined him. She was small compared to him, barely reaching his shoulder. But Jack had learned that she was tougher than she looked. "The guards took away my tools yesterday," she said. "They said I was not allowed to fix things anymore." Jack knew that Zara had been helping other prisoners repair their few belongings. She could fix almost anything with just simple materials. "What did you tell them?" "I said I was just trying to help, but I think they know I was studying the prison systems." Jack stopped walking. "What kind of systems?" Zara looked around to make sure no guards were listening. "The power systems, the communication systems, the security systems. This prison has weaknesses, Jack, big weaknesses." "I do not want to hear about that," Jack said quickly, but Zara continued. "Anyway, the prison was built to hold different species separately, but they put us all together. The security systems are not designed for that. If someone knew how to use those weaknesses—" "Zara, stop," Jack said firmly. "I am not interested in escaping. I am not a leader anymore. I am just a prisoner." Zara looked at him with her large purple eyes. "You cannot stop being who you are. Jack Morrison, the other prisoners look up to you. They need hope." That afternoon, Jack was called to see the prison warden. 2 guards escorted him through corridors he had never seen before. These corridors were cleaner and brighter than the rest of the prison. They had windows that showed the dark space outside. Warden Vex sat behind a large desk in a room filled with books and expensive furniture. Vex was an insectoid being with 6 arms and compound eyes. His skin was dark green and shiny like armor. When he moved, Jack could hear clicking sounds from his joints. "Sit down, Morrison," Vex said. His voice buzzed like an angry bee. Jack sat in a chair across from the desk. The chair was uncomfortable and too small for him. "You have been here for 6 months, Vex continued. "In that time, we have had more escape attempts than in the previous 2 years combined. Do you know why?" Jack shrugged. "Maybe your security is getting worse." Vex's compound eyes focused on Jack. "It is because of you. The other prisoners think you are some kind of hero. They think you can lead them to freedom." "I have not encouraged anyone to escape," Jack said. "You do not have to encourage them. Just being here is enough." Vex stood up and walked around his desk. "You see, Morrison, this prison runs on fear. Prisoners are afraid of punishment, so they behave. But you are not afraid. That makes other prisoners less afraid, too." Jack said nothing. He watched as Vex walked to a window and looked out at the dark space. "I have a solution," Vex said. "Tomorrow we are moving you to solitary confinement. You will spend the rest of your sentence alone, with no contact with other prisoners." Jack felt his heart sink. Solitary confinement was the worst punishment. In the prison, prisoners who went there often came out broken and insane. "You cannot do that without a reason," Jack said. Vex smiled, showing sharp teeth. "I can do whatever I want. This is my prison." That night, Jack lay on his bed and thought about what Vex had said. He had tried to avoid being a leader, but it seemed impossible. Other prisoners looked to him for hope, and that made him dangerous to the council. The next morning, Jack was eating breakfast when alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the dining hall. Guards ran in with their weapons drawn. "Lockdown! Everyone stay in your seats!" A guard shouted. Jack looked around and saw that 3 prisoners were missing from their usual table. They were humans who had been planning an escape attempt. Jack had heard them talking about it, but had not tried to stop them. The guards searched the dining hall, but could not find the missing prisoners. They were angry and began hitting prisoners with their clubs. One guard hit Ben Clark so hard that he fell off his bench. Jack stood up without thinking. "Leave him alone." The guard turned to Jack with anger in his eyes. "Sit down, Morrison, or you will get the same treatment." Jack looked at Ben, who was bleeding from his mouth. Then he looked at the other prisoners who were all watching him. He knew that what he did next would be important. "I said leave him alone," Jack repeated. The guard raised his club, but Crom suddenly stood up. Then Zara stood up. Then Tony Wells. Within seconds, every prisoner in the dining hall was standing. They all stared at the guards with determination in their eyes. The guards looked nervous. There were only 20 guards in the dining hall, but there were over 300 prisoners. The guards called for backup on their radios. "Everyone sit down now!" The head guard shouted, but no one moved. They all stood there, united in their defiance. Jack had not planned this, but he had somehow become the leader of a prison rebellion. More guards arrived with riot gear and weapons. They surrounded the prisoners and prepared to use force. Jack knew that people would get hurt if this continued. "Everyone sit down," Jack said quietly. The prisoners looked at him with surprise. They had expected him to tell them to fight. "Sit down," Jack repeated. "This is not the right time." Slowly, the prisoners sat down. The guards relaxed but kept their weapons ready. Later that day, Jack was moved to solitary confinement, as Thex had promised. His new cell was even smaller than his old one, and he was not allowed to leave it. He had no contact with other prisoners and no access to the exercise yard, but as Jack sat alone in his dark cell, he realized something important. The other prisoners had stood up for him. They had been willing to fight the guards to protect him. For the first time since arriving at Terminus, Jack felt like he was not alone. He also realized that Zara had been right. The prison did have weaknesses. And maybe, just maybe, Jack had been in solitary confinement for 2 weeks. The small cell was darker than his old one, and he only saw guards when they brought him food. They slid a tray through a slot in the door twice a day. The food was always cold and tasted like metal, but Jack was not wasting his time. He listened to everything. He heard the guards talking as they walked past his cell. He learned their names and their schedules. He counted their footsteps and timed how long it took them to walk from one end of the corridor to the other. Most importantly, Jack discovered something terrible. Through the thin walls, he could hear sounds from deep below the prison. The sounds were rhythmic and mechanical, like machines working. But mixed with the machine sounds were voices. Weak, tired voices that sounded like prisoners working. Jack realized that Terminus was not just a prison. It was a slave labor camp. The prisoners were being forced to work in mines beneath the prison. They were digging for rare crystals that powered the council's war machines. Even in prison, Jack was still part of the system he had fought against. One night, Jack heard something different. Instead of the usual guard footsteps, he heard a soft scratching sound outside his cell door. The sound continued for several minutes, then stopped. Jack waited, but nothing happened. The next morning, when the guard brought his breakfast, Jack noticed something. The food tray had a small piece of metal hidden under the bread. The metal was thin and sharp, like a tool. Jack quickly hid it in his pocket before the guard could see. That night, Jack used the metal tool to work on the ventilation grate in his cell. The grate was old and the screws were loose. After an hour of careful work, he managed to remove it. Behind the grate was a narrow air shaft that led to other parts of the prison. Jack was too big to fit through the shaft, but he could hear voices coming from it. He listened carefully and recognized Zara's voice. She was talking to someone about power systems and security weaknesses. "Can you hear me?" Jack whispered into the shaft. The voices stopped. Then Zara's voice came back, very quiet. "Jack, is that you?" "Yes, how did you get that tool to me?" "Amy Parker helped me. She is a human who knows about computers. She has been studying the prison systems." Jack had heard about Amy Parker. She was a young woman who had been arrested for hacking into council databases. She was small and quiet, but very smart. "What are you planning?" Jack asked. "We are planning to escape," Zara said. "All of us. Every prisoner in this place." Jack felt his heart race. "That is impossible. There are too many guards." "Amy found something," Zara continued. "The prison's security systems have a weakness. They were designed to keep different species separate, but we are all mixed together. If we work together, we can break out." "How many prisoners are involved?" "Almost 3,000. Word has spread through the entire prison. Everyone wants to be free." Jack closed his eyes. 3,000 prisoners trying to escape would be chaos. Many would die. But staying in prison meant a slow death working in the mines. "What do you need from me?" Jack asked. "We need a leader. Someone the guards fear. Someone who can unite all the different species." Jack thought about this for a long time. He had tried to avoid being a leader, but circumstances kept forcing him into that role. Maybe it was time to stop running from who he was. "Tell me the plan," Jack said, over the next week. Jack learned about the escape plan through whispered conversations in the airshaft. Amy Parker had discovered that the prison's main computer system controlled everything. The doors, the lights, the communication systems, even the weapons in the armory. The computer system was protected by multiple security barriers, but Amy had found a way to break through them. She needed access to 3 different control terminals at the same time. The terminals were in different parts of the prison, and each one required a different skill to operate. The plan was simple but dangerous. 3 teams would attack the control terminals during the shift change, when there were fewer guards on duty. Amy would hack the main computer and open all the cell doors. Then every prisoner would fight their way to the landing bays where the transport ships were kept. "What about the guards?" Jack asked through the ventilation shaft. "Crom is organizing the fighters," Zara replied. "He has been teaching combat skills to prisoners from peaceful species. Everyone will be ready to fight." Jack knew that many prisoners would die in the escape attempt, but he also knew that they were dying slowly in the mines anyway. At least this way, they would die fighting for freedom. "I want to help," Jack said. "You are in solitary confinement? How can you help?" Jack had been thinking about this problem. "I can get out of the cell. The ventilation shaft connects to the main air system. I can crawl through it to reach other parts of the prison." "That is too dangerous," Zara said. "The shafts are narrow and full of fans and filters." "I can do it," Jack insisted. "I need to be there when the escape begins. The other prisoners need to see me fighting with them." The next day, Jack began preparing for his part in the escape. He used his metal tool to make the ventilation shaft opening bigger. He practiced crawling through it quietly. He learned the layout of the air system by listening to sounds from different parts of the prison. 3 days before the escape, Jack heard bad news through the ventilation shaft. Warden X had discovered that something was being planned. He did not know the details, but he had increased security and moved more guards to the prison. "We might have to cancel the escape," Zara said through the shaft. "No," Jack replied firmly. "If we wait, Dex will discover everything. We have to go now. But the extra guards will make it much harder." "Then we will have to be smarter than the guards," Jack said. "Tell Amy to move the escape to tomorrow night, during the shift change, just like we planned." The next evening, Jack began his journey. Through the ventilation system, the shaft was narrow and uncomfortable. He had to crawl on his hands and knees, pushing himself forward with his elbows. The metal walls were cold and sharp. Jack crawled for what felt like hours. He passed through rooms he had never seen before. He heard guards talking and prisoners working. He smelled the chemical stench of the mines below. Finally, Jack reached a ventilation grate that opened into the main corridor. Through the grate, he could see the control terminal that Amy needed to access. 2 guards stood nearby, but they were not paying attention. Jack waited until exactly 9 o'clock. That was when the escape would begin. He heard alarms start to ring in other parts of the prison. The guards in the corridor looked confused and reached for their radios. Jack kicked out the ventilation grate and dropped into the corridor. The guards turned toward him with surprise. They had not expected a prisoner to appear from the ceiling. "Jack Morrison," one of the guards said. "You are supposed to be in solitary confinement." Jack smiled grimly. "I got bored." The 2 guards raised their weapons, but Jack was faster. He grabbed a piece of the broken ventilation grate and threw it at the first guard. The metal hit the guard in the face and he fell down. Jack tackled the second guard and took his weapon. Amy Parker appeared from a side corridor. She was small and thin, with short black hair and quick hands. She ran to the control terminal and began typing on the keyboard. "How long do you need?" Jack asked. 2 minutes, Amy replied without looking up from the keyboard. Jack could hear more guards coming. He positioned himself between Amy and the corridor, Ready to fight anyone who tried to stop her, the first group of guards appeared around the corner. There were 5 of them, all armed with energy weapons. Jack fired his stolen weapon and took cover behind a metal support beam. The guards fired back, and energy bolts flew through the air. Jack felt the heat as they passed close to his body. He returned fire and hit one of the guards in the shoulder. "Hurry, Amy!" Jack shouted. "Almost done," she replied. More guards arrived. Jack was outnumbered 10 to 1, but he kept fighting. He knew that if Amy could access the computer system, every prisoner in the facility would be free. An energy bolt hit the wall next to Jack's head. He rolled to a new position and fired again. 2 more guards fell, but more kept coming. Then Jack heard the sound he had been waiting for. All around the prison, cell doors began to open. The computer system was unlocked, and 3,000 prisoners were now free. "Got it," Amy shouted. "The system is ours." Jack could hear the sound of running feet and shouting voices. The prisoners were fighting their way out of their cells. The guards were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Crom appeared in the corridor, leading a group of freed prisoners. The big Centauri warrior had a huge smile on his face. "Morrison! You did it." "We are not done yet," Jack replied. "We need to get to the landing bays." Jack, Amy, and Crom led the group through the prison corridors. Everywhere they went, they found more freed prisoners joining them. Humans, Altarians, Centauri, and dozens of other species ran together toward freedom. But as they approached the landing bays, Jack realized they had a problem. Warden X was waiting for them with a large group of guards. The guards were wearing heavy armor and carrying powerful weapons. "You will not escape from my prison," Thex said through a loudspeaker. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Jack looked at the 3,000 prisoners behind him. They were tired, hungry, and scared, but they were also determined to be free. They had chosen to fight rather than live as slaves. The battle at the landing bays was fierce and bloody. Jack Morrison led 3,000 prisoners against Warden X and his guards. Energy weapons lit up the dark corridors like lightning. The sound of fighting echoed through every part of the prison. Jack dove behind a metal cargo container as energy bolts flew over his head. He could hear prisoners screaming and guards shouting orders. The smell of burned metal and smoke filled the air. Crom charged at a group of guards with nothing but his bare hands. The big Centauri warrior was incredibly strong and fast. He knocked down 3 guards before they could raise their weapons. But an energy bolt hit him in the chest and he fell to the ground. "Crom!" Jack shouted. He ran to help his friend, but Amy Parker grabbed his arm. "Jack, we need to get to the control room for the landing bay doors," she said. "Without those doors open, no one can escape." Jack looked at Crom, who was breathing heavily but still alive. Then he looked at the hundreds of prisoners who were counting on him. He made a difficult choice. "Zara, help Crom," Jack called to the Altarian engineer. "Amy and I will get the doors open." Jack and Amy fought their way through the battle toward the control room. The room was small and filled with computer screens and control panels. 2 guards were inside, trying to call for help on their radios. Jack shot one guard while Amy tackled the other. The second guard was bigger than Amy, but she was quicker. She hit him with a metal tool, and he stopped moving. "Can you open the doors?" Jack asked. Amy sat down at the main control panel and began typing rapidly. "The system is protected, but I can break through it. Give me 3 minutes." Jack watched the battle through the control room window. The prisoners were fighting bravely, but they were losing. The guards had better weapons and armor. Many prisoners were already wounded or dead. Then Jack saw something that made his blood run cold. More guards were arriving through a side entrance. These were not regular prison guards. They were Council Special Forces, wearing black armor and carrying heavy weapons. "Amy, we need those doors open now," Jack said urgently. "Almost there," Amy replied without looking up from the keyboard. The Special Forces guards began shooting into the crowd of prisoners. Their weapons were much more powerful than regular guard weapons. Prisoners who were hit by these weapons did not get back up. Jack watched as the brave beings who had followed him were cut down by superior firepower. He felt responsible for every death. He had led them into this battle, and now they were dying because of his decisions. "Got it!" Amy shouted. "The doors are opening!" Jack looked up and saw the massive landing bay doors slowly opening. Beyond the doors was open space and freedom. But between the prisoners and freedom were dozens of heavily armed guards. Jack grabbed the radio from one of the unconscious guards. "All prisoners, listen to me," he said into the radio. "The doors are open, but we need to fight our way through the guards. Stay together and protect each other." Jack and Amy left the control room and rejoined the battle. Jack found Crom leaning against a wall, holding his wounded chest. The big warrior was pale but still conscious. "Can you walk?" Jack asked. "I can fight," Crom replied with a weak smile. Zara appeared beside them, carrying a guard's weapon. Her blue skin was dirty, and she had a cut on her forehead, but her purple eyes were determined. "The transport ships are just beyond those guards," she said. "If we can reach them, we can escape." Jack looked at the remaining prisoners. There were about 2,000 left. Many were wounded, but they were all still fighting. They looked at Jack with hope and trust, waiting for his orders. "We charge together," Jack said. "Everyone at once. Do not stop until you reach the ships." Jack raised his weapon and pointed it toward the guards. "For freedom!" he shouted. "For freedom!" 2,000 voices shouted back. The prisoners charged as one massive group. Jack ran at the front with Crom and Zara beside him. The guards fired their weapons, but there were too many prisoners to stop them all. Jack felt an energy bolt graze his shoulder, but he kept running. He saw prisoners falling around him, but he could not stop to help them. If he stopped, everyone would die. The prisoners reached the guard line and hand-to-hand fighting began. Jack used his weapon like a club, hitting guards who tried to block his path. Crom grabbed a guard and threw him across the room despite his wound. Slowly, the prisoners fought their way toward the transport ships. But the cost was terrible. Jack could see bodies everywhere, both prisoners and guards. The floor was covered with blood and the air was thick with smoke. Finally, Jack reached the first transport ship. It was a small vessel that could carry about 50 people. Amy was already at the controls, trying to start the engines. "How many ships are there?" Jack asked. 20, Zara replied. "But some are damaged." Jack realized that 20 ships could not carry 2,000 prisoners. Many would have to stay behind. And those who stayed would probably be killed by the guards. "Get the ships started," Jack ordered. "Load the wounded first." The prisoners began boarding the ships. Jack helped carry wounded prisoners onto the vessels. Crom insisted on staying to help. Even though he was hurt badly. As the ships filled up, Jack counted how many prisoners were left. There were still over 500 who had no way to escape. They looked at him with desperate eyes, knowing they might die. Jack made another difficult decision. "I'm staying," he announced. "What?" Zara said in shock. "Jack, you cannot stay. You are the reason we are all free." "Someone needs to hold off the guards while the ships escape," Jack replied. "And there are too many people for all the ships." "Then I stay too," Crom said. "And me," said Amy. Soon, over 100 prisoners volunteered to stay behind. They would fight the guards to give the others time to escape. Jack felt proud of these brave beings. They were willing to sacrifice themselves so others could be free. This was what the Council would never understand. When people fought for something they believed in, they became stronger than any army. The transport ships began taking off one by one. Jack watched through the landing bay doors as they flew away into space. Each ship carried 50 freed prisoners to safety, but as the last ship prepared to leave, Council warships appeared outside the prison. There were 6 large ships, each one capable of destroying the small transport vessels. "They will never make it past those warships," Zara said sadly. Jack looked at the warships and then at the remaining prisoners. He had an idea, but it was dangerous and would probably kill him. "Amy, can you overload the prison's power core?" he asked. Amy's eyes went wide. "Yes, but it would destroy the entire prison, and probably kill everyone still inside." "What if we time it right? Could the explosion damage the warships?" Amy thought for a moment. If we overload the core and then detonate it near the warships, yes. But someone would have to stay behind to trigger it manually. Jack looked at his friends. Crom was badly wounded and could barely stand. Zara was brilliant and could help rebuild the galaxy. Amy was young and had her whole life ahead of her. I will do it, Jack said quietly. No, Crom said firmly. I will. Do it, I am already dying from my wounds. Let me die with honor. The big Centauri warrior stood up straighter despite his pain. My people believe that a warrior's death should have meaning. This death would have great meaning. Jack wanted to argue, but he could see that Crom had made up his mind. The warrior was right. He was dying anyway, and this way his death would save thousands of lives. The warships are moving closer, Zara said urgently. We need to decide now. Jack clasped Crom's hand. Your name will be remembered across the galaxy. Crom smiled. Make sure it is remembered with yours, Jack Morrison. Jack, Zara, and Amy boarded the last transport ship. As they took off, Jack looked back at Crom standing alone in the landing bay. The warrior raised his hand in farewell. The transport ship flew toward the warships, which began firing at it immediately. But before they could destroy the small vessel, a brilliant explosion lit up space behind them. Crom had triggered the power core overload. The explosion was so massive that it destroyed 3 of the Council warships instantly. The other 3 were badly damaged and could not pursue the escaping prisoners. Jack watched the explosion through the ship's window. He felt sad about losing his friend, but also proud. Crom had died as a hero, saving the lives of people from many different worlds. The transport ships met at a rendezvous point in empty space. Jack counted them carefully. 17 ships had escaped, carrying over 800 freed prisoners. It was not everyone, but it was more than he had dared to hope for. As the ships prepared to jump to hyperspace, Jack received a message on the ship's radio. It was from Captain Lisa Grant, his old commander. Jack, this is Lisa. The whole galaxy is watching. News of the prison break is spreading everywhere. You have started something that cannot be stopped. Jack smiled for the first time in months. The Council had tried to silence him by putting him in prison. Instead, they had created the spark that would light a fire across the galaxy. The escaped prisoners were no longer just criminals. They were the beginning of a rebellion that would fight for freedom on every world. And Jack Morrison, the man the Council called a criminal, was about to become the hero the galaxy needed. 6 months after the escape from Terminus, Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of a captured Council warship. The ship was called the Freedom, renamed after Jack's crew took it from the Council forces. Through the large windows, Jack could see hundreds of other ships. They came from dozens of different worlds, all united in rebellion against the Council. The hidden base was on an old mining planet in the Outer Rim. The planet had been abandoned for years, but Jack's people had turned it into the center of their rebellion. They built repair shops for damaged ships, training centers for new fighters, and communication centers to spread their message across the galaxy. Jack wore a simple blue uniform with no medals or decorations. He was still the same man who had been called a criminal by the Council, but now millions of beings across the galaxy called him something else. They called him the Liberator. Zara Cole stood beside him, looking at star charts on a computer screen. The young Altarian had become Jack's most trusted advisor. Her knowledge of technology had helped them capture many Council facilities. The LATST reports are good, Zara said with a smile. 3 more star systems have declared independence from the Council. The Altarian government officially joined our cause yesterday. Jack nodded but did not look happy. What about the Council's response? They are mobilizing the pacification fleet, Zara replied quietly. Jack felt his heart sink. The pacification fleet was the Council's most feared weapon. These were massive ships designed to destroy entire planets. The Council used them to punish worlds that refused to obey. Which planet will they target first? Jack asked. Amy Parker looked up from her computer station. She had become the rebellion's chief intelligence officer. Our sources say they are heading for New Geneva. It is a human colony world with 2 million people. Jack closed his eyes. New Geneva was one of the first worlds to support his rebellion. The people there had welcomed escaped prisoners and helped them find new homes. Now they would pay the price for their kindness. How long before the fleet reaches New Geneva? Jack asked. 4 days, Amy replied. Jack looked at the rebel fleet through the window. They had over 300 ships, but most were small and lightly armed. The pacification fleet had 50 massive warships, each one capable of destroying a city. We cannot win a direct battle against them, Zara said sadly. Then we'll have to be smarter, Jack replied. For 3 days, Jack worked with his commanders to plan their attack. They could not save New Geneva by fighting the pacification fleet directly, but they could strike at the Council's capital while the fleet was away. The plan was dangerous and would require perfect timing. While the pacification fleet was destroying New Geneva, Jack would lead a small force to Nexus Prime, the Council's homeworld. Their target was the Council's main government building, where the leaders made their decisions. On the 4th day, Jack's force arrived at Nexus Prime. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and white cities. It was hard to believe that such a peaceful-looking world was the center of so much evil. Jack's ship, the Freedom, led 12 other vessels toward the planet. They were small and fast, designed to avoid the planet's defenses rather than fight. Council patrol ships are moving to intercept us, reported the ship's pilot, a young human named Rick Stone. Take us through the asteroid field, Jack ordered. Use the rocks for cover. The Freedom dove into a field of floating asteroids near the planet. The Council ships were bigger and could not follow safely. Jack's small ships weaved between the rocks like fish swimming through coral dot as they approached the planet. Jack received terrible news over the radio. The pacification fleet had reached New Geneva and begun their attack. The colony's defense ships were fighting bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. New Geneva is sending out evacuation ships, Amy reported. But the Council fleet is destroying them as they try to escape. Jack felt rage building inside him. The Council was not just conquering New Geneva. They were committing genocide, killing innocent people to send a message to other worlds. How many people are on New Geneva? Jack asked. 2 million, Amy replied. Including 50,000 children. Jack's hands formed fists. The Council leaders sitting in their comfortable offices on Nexus Prime had ordered the deaths of 2 million innocent people. They thought they were safe from the consequences of their actions. Jack was about to prove them wrong. The Freedom and its escort ships broke through the planet's outer defenses. Council fighter ships tried to stop them, but Jack's pilots were experienced rebels who had learned to fight against superior numbers. The government building was a massive tower that rose above the planet's capital city. It was protected by energy shields and defensive weapons. But Amy had discovered a weakness in the building's computer systems. I can disable the shields for 30 seconds, Amy said. That should be enough time for one ship to get through. Which ship? Zara asked. Jack looked at his friends and crew members. They had all risked their lives to follow him this far. Now, he was asking them to follow him into an almost certain suicide mission. I will take a small shuttle, Jack said. The rest of you escape to hyperspace. We are not leaving you, Zara said firmly. This is not a discussion, Jack replied. I need you to survive and continue the rebellion. Someone has to carry on the fight if I do not make it back. Rick Stone stepped forward. Captain, let me fly. The shuttle, you are too important to risk. Jack shook his head. This is my responsibility? The Council leaders need to see my face when they realize their time is over. Jack prepared a small shuttle for the final attack. The shuttle was loaded with explosives, enough to destroy the entire government building. If the plan worked, the Council's leadership would be eliminated, and their war machine would collapse. As Jack climbed into the shuttle, Zara grabbed his arm. Jack, there has to be another way. Maybe, Jack said. But we do not have time to find it. Every minute we wait, more people die on New Geneva. Jack launched the shuttle toward the government building. Amy disabled the shields exactly as planned, and Jack flew through the opening. Council defenders fired at him, but the shuttle was Small and fast. Jack crashed the shuttle into the building's main conference room where the council leaders were meeting. The explosion was massive, destroying half the building and killing everyone inside, but Jack was not killed in the explosion. At the last second, he had activated the shuttle's emergency teleporter, which sent him to safety on the Freedom. It was a technology that Amy had stolen from the Council's own ships. The destruction of the Council's leadership sent shock waves across the galaxy. Without their leaders, the pacification fleet stopped its attack on New Geneva and returned to defend Nexus Prime, but it was too late. The rebellion had already achieved its goal over the next few weeks. Council forces across the galaxy began surrendering or switching sides. The remaining council members agreed to peace talks. Knowing that their cause was lost, the peace talks were held on a neutral space station. Jack represented the rebellion while the surviving council members sent their diplomats. The negotiations lasted for days, but finally an agreement was reached. The council would be dissolved and replaced with a new government. This new government would represent all species equally, with no single species having control over others. Slavery would be banned throughout the galaxy, and all slave labor camps would be closed. Jack was offered the position of leader in the new government, but he refused. He had never wanted power for himself. He only wanted freedom for all beings in the galaxy. Instead, Jack returned to Earth, where he was welcomed as a hero. Millions of people gathered to hear him speak, but Jack's words were simple and humble. "I am not a hero," he told the crowd. "I'm just a man who could not stand by while innocent people suffered. The real heroes are the beings who risked everything to fight for freedom. The real heroes are the people like Crom, who gave their lives so others could be free." A monument was built on Earth to honor Jack Morrison and all who had died fighting for freedom. The monument was made of black stone with names carved into it from dozens of different worlds. At the top of the monument were Jack's words from his trial. "History will remember which side we chose." Children from many different species came to visit the monument. They played together in the parks around it, free from the fear and hatred that had once divided their worlds. Jack Morrison lived the rest of his life quietly on Earth. He never sought fame or glory. He worked as a teacher, helping young people understand the importance of standing up for what is right. When Jack died many years later, beings from across the galaxy came to his funeral. They came from the human colonies, from Altair, from Centauri, and from hundreds of other worlds. They came to honor the man who had taught them that ordinary people could change the galaxy. The inscription on Jack's grave was simple. He was called a criminal by tyrants, but history remembers him as a hero, and history did remember Jack Morrison. His story was told on every world, in every language, to every generation. It became a reminder that freedom is not given by governments or councils, but must be fought for by ordinary people who are willing to stand up for what is right. The galaxy chose freedom, and Jack Morrison had made that choice possible.